Just before I went on air this morning, we got a news release here at the station that Steve Yates, the chairman of the Idaho Republican Party, is stepping down from his position. I think we know why. In fact, our next guest will get to that in just a moment. We're at 8:43. 41 right now. Bill Cowley with you on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. I wanted to remind people this morning, if you're listening, but you're struggling with listening to the program, it may be what's going on between your ears, and you may need to get in touch with Dr. Christine Pickup at Mount Harrison Audiology in Rupert. She's a doctor of audiology. Now, why would you choose her office? Independence. Mount Harrison Audiology is the only independent, locally owned hearing healthcare practice in southern Idaho. That's going to be more choices for treatment than just one brand and lower cost. Trust your hearing to a certified audiologist. Call Mount Harrison Audiology for your appointment today, 208-312-0957. Our guest, Randy Stapilus, publisher of Idaho Weekly Briefing, joins us on Monday mornings between 8:40 and 9 o'clock. Randy, I mentioned the fact that Yates has made this announcement because in your column yesterday, you suggested it's a good possibility he's going to be running for public office very soon.
There's been some talk about that he might be running for lieutenant governor. That would be that's been it's been talked about a little bit. It popped up in one other column, not one of mine, but somebody else's recently, and it certainly seems to be a distinct possibility. I saw the release, and he didn't mention a specific reason in the release for why he would be doing that, but that would certainly be an ample reason. You should not be running for a partisan office and be chair of a state party at the same time. So it appears they're recognizing that he's opting out, or at least that's the way it seems right now.
Idaho has been trying to sell a lot of dairy products and potatoes in certain parts of Asia, and I know that he's quite fluent in Mandarin Chinese. I actually heard him speak it one time at a dinner. So he definitely has a selling point that he could be a good liaison in any administration with some overseas powers.
Well, and that would be something that might have a certain kind of appeal, because that same kind of selling point in terms of overseas sales and those kind of connections is something that Governor Butch Otter has long sold himself on. But that's something that he has had some private sector background and experience with, and something that he can kind of bring to the table as governor. You bring in somebody new as governor, and there may be some usefulness in that.
I was looking over the list of other potential candidates for lieutenant governor, and you've mentioned them. And one of them I know personally. I'll in full disclosure, I sat down with her just about the beginning of the new year and mapped out a media strategy with her. We have a couple of candidates who are, I guess, three candidates who are announced, and some people say though, with Yates getting in, that means it's all over for the others.
Well, I don't think that a contest like this, and I have the hunch that Yates might even say the same thing. I don't think that in a contest like this, where you have a multitude of candidates and no one that has statewide voting record and background and exposure on a massive level, it's a very difficult kind of thing to call. In the case of Yates, you do have somebody that has been state party chairman for a while, but on the other hand, he hasn't lived in Idaho all that long, and that's not necessarily going to cut that well. Mostly, in most cases, Idaho voters are fairly sensitive to that kind of thing. He has never run for office, certainly in Idaho. I don't believe he's run for office elsewhere either. And the other candidates have experience as candidates, as fundraisers, and developing their own networks and organizations. Marv Hagedorn, for example, in Meridian, is very well known in conservative circles, has been for a good many years, and no doubt has a pretty good, strong network of personal support that he's been able to build up for a period of time. these kind of races can get very, very unpredictable, and when you've got a number of candidates, no one of whom seems like the obvious front runner. In 2002, there was a Republican primary for lieutenant governor that was kind of like this, had four major candidates in it, and they were all substantial. One of them is currently a U.S. Senator, Jim Risch. Another is the current State Department of Agriculture director, Celia Gould. Was a former candidate for governor, uh, and the other was the incumbent lieutenant governor who had been appointed to the position. So that was a very unpredictable kind of race, and nobody knew how it was going to go. Risch wound up winning it. But it was not by an enormous amount. He did not crack as much as 40% of the vote. It was very hard to call, and right now I would see this one as pretty hard to call too.
It's 8:48. Our guest is Randy Stapilus from Idaho Weekly Briefing. We're at 41. Bill Colley with you as well on Top Story on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. For people who would like to take a look at the briefing, where would you send them?
I would send them to www.ridenbaughpress.com. That's RIDENBAUGH.
I would imagine a lot of people in the establishment end of the Republican Party, because of their relationship county by county with Yates, would offer endorsements, but the problem is the rank and file people going out and voting on primary day don't necessarily follow those endorsements much anymore.
Well, they won't necessarily. I'm not sure how many of them necessarily are all that familiar with Yates. Uh, the big plus side that he could accurately bring to it is pointing out that prior to the time when he came in, the party was pretty much at war with itself, and there are still a whole lot of tensions there. But he's been able to keep the war at bay. He's been able to keep the party during the time that he's been there running, at least so far as we can see externally, running reasonably smoothly and keep it running on board. It's worked out reasonably well in that regard. He's done what he said he would do, and I'm sure there are a good number of Republicans out there that are fairly grateful for that. Whether that necessarily translates to a big electoral win, well, we'll see. He may wind up having really good political skills for running for the job, but that has yet to be. We have yet to find out about that.
Did you see the headline from the Idaho Freedom Foundation in relation to our current governor, Butch Otter, calling him? Well, it said Otter abducted by aliens. It was picked up as well by the Washington Examiner,
I've
and
I've
was
seen a number of variations
it
on
was
that theme in the last couple of weeks. Um, people saying, in essence, the point being that he seems to be acting out of character, or acting out of what they thought was his character. Anyhow, uh, it's it's kind of an amusing stuff, but on the basis of just a very few bills and support of a very limited amount of issues. Uh, I think that's kind of a broad sweeping kind of thing. If you look at 98 or 99% of what he has dealt with and what he has had to say and what he has done, I'm not sure that there's been a lot of inconsistency. But on certain things, yeah, I can see why people are flying flags and raising questions.
the cosmetology bill, I think, was one, and I think the other happened to be civil asset forfeiture. People thought it was completely out of character for him to veto the relaxation of restrictions on those two issues.
And those do seem a little bit, at least on the surface, a little bit out of character. I could easily have imagined Butch Otter from years ago have even floor sponsoring either of those kind of bills, at least in general concept. But that specifics can run in odd directions over time.
Well, there's a couple of issues that we're waiting on that are much bigger than those two bills at the moment. The grocery tax, obviously, as well as the Garvey bonds. and we don't know what's going to happen. But boy, if he shoots down the road repair bill, I had a conversation with Matt Erpelding last week just after we spoke with you, and I said, your speculation and mine was there wouldn't be a special session, and he said, I think we almost would have to have one if that goes down.
Well, my fairly strong guess in the case of the highway bill is that he probably winds up signing that. Uh, there's no guarantee that if he were to shoot it down, and if there were a special session, that he could get a more expansive bill through. Uh, my guess is that he would probably, based on what he has done in the past, is to take the half loaf that he can get, and be happy with that. I would guess that is what happens. I would be a little surprised if it did. The grocery tax bill, I think that one really kind of hangs in the balance. I was very interested last week to see Lieutenant Governor Brad Little, who is a close ally of the governor's, make a public statement calling on the governor to sign the grocery tax repeal bill, and that is a bill that Otter has opposed in the past. He said that was a bad idea financially. There were issues involved with it, and I'll be very curious to see which way he goes on that. That one I think is a little bit more unpredictable at this point, and the time is running out real fast. He's about out of time for making a decision. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a decision on one or both of those by the end of the day.
Can he just let them, if he doesn't touch them, do they become law?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Is that if he does not act on them, they become law without his signature.
So at this stage of the game, he probably, if he's looking to help his political ally in this situation, he may do nothing.
It's possible. It's given all the attention that's gone on to it. It would be a little bit unusual. You don't usually just let legislation become law, kind of casually in most cases like that. And usually, when that happens, when it does happen, and the legislation is high profile, it's because there's some kind of a moral issue involved, or ethical concern. And in this case, what's really involved is a matter of money, and that concern is not the sort of thing that usually leads to that kind of an end result. But who knows? There hasn't been any action so far that I've seen, and it could happen.
I've got a quick note before we go, and you have a piece at the briefing about this week. We have the reaction from our congressional delegation to the strike on Syria, and I guess I'm not surprised. Raul Labrador, though, really parsed his words on this by saying, I really would appreciate the president in the future coming to us for congressional authorization. I think that of all four, he wouldn't be comfortable with what happened, and yet he's not looking for a direct confrontation with the White House.
Well, I think his statements have been, even those where he's wound up voting against a White House initiative. He's tried to avoid positioning himself too directly against it. He was more of a supporter of the Trump candidacy than a number of others were during last year, and I think he's not really wanted to position himself in opposition, at least not much. But there are some of these cases where he's finding the path kind of rocky.
And I think that as time goes on, if we have more of this, there may be a clean break, I would assume.
It could happen. It could happen. I think it would. I think it would be kind of reluctant on the part of Labrador to make for kind of an outright break. I don't think that he really wants to do that. A whole lot of the base that he has, his own base of support back in Idaho is overlaps, I'm sure, considerably with Trump support, and I'm not sure that he really wants to go sideways with that many people. So I think he's walking pretty carefully. This is really a very careful dance that he's doing.
Randy Stapilus, for people tuning in this morning, before we wrap up, what's the web address again for Idaho Weekly Briefing?
It is www.ridenbaughpress.com. That's RIDENBAUGH.
We look forward to speaking again next Monday morning.
We'll talk with you then.
Take care, sir. Randy Staples joining us this morning on News Radio 1310, KLIX, and newsradio1310.com. We're at 8:58, and we've got a break for news from Fox coming up at 9 o'clock. One more hour of top story ahead with Bill Colley. Also, in the next hour of the program, we're going to spend a few minutes. He's booked at 9:20 this morning, our time. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Heil joining us from back on the East Coast. Going to talk about his experiences not once but twice meeting Don Rickles at various events. Rickles, a big supporter of the U.S. military, passed away last week. Also, we may get the colonel's thoughts too on the strike on Syria from a military perspective. That's on the way as well. A discussion about, well, a question posed to Nikki Haley, our UN ambassador, about the potential for World War III being on the way. Stick around.